what's your background, who you are, and where you're coming from, why you're here in the amazing career in healthcare and administration. And start with Abe.
Sure. My name's Abraham Trujillo. I go by Abe. Um, I have a bachelor's in health administration. I'm currently working on my master's in health administration. I did an internship at Pomona Valley Hospital and one at the VA Loma Linda. I recently got picked up by Kaiser for an administrative coordinator position. So I am cleared to work and I start next week.
Outstanding. That's a good outfit. You'll learn a lot there.
Appreciate it.
I'm sorry, father. Well, the next, Marie.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I was having trouble with my headset earlier.
Mhm.
Maureen McLaughlin. I'm actually a director of IT. This is my last class with University of Laverne. I
Yeah.
graduate after this. And honestly, I am focused on business administration, but I thought it was an interesting topic and I needed some units for graduation. I need an elective unit, so it was just something I was interested in and decided to take the course.
Thank you. Louis?
Hey everyone, so my name is Louis. It's my first term for my master's in healthcare administration. I chose a concentration in long-term care. My bachelor's was in marketing, and I actually chose to do a master's in healthcare because I took an internship when I was during my senior year, and I took an internship at a hospital where I got offered an uh, administrative position, and then I really liked it. So here I am now trying to pursue that same career.
Great.
Thank you. Well, let's start. I'm
All
so
right.
excited to introduce our very special guest, Dr. Keith Knapp. And Dr. Knapp is my professional role model. I met Dr. Knapp several times at the Knapp conference. And he's a nationally respected leader, and he's top of the top leader in the field of health services, executive leadership, and long-term services and support. So he has spent all his life career improving the quality of life for older adults and helping prepare the future leaders. And today is my greatest honor to welcome Dr. Knapp, and he's here to share his experience, his insight, and advice on leadership and career pathways in LTSS. So this is a wonderful opportunity to learn directly from someone who has walked the path you may want to take. So let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Knapp.
Oh, yeah. All right. So can I get you to write that down and send it to my mother-in-law? That sounded pretty good.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, that'd
Yeah.
be great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for showing an interest in what not a lot of people your age show interest in until they have some sort of a family experience encountering the long-term care segment of our healthcare delivery system, and then they find out that I should have been paying more careful attention to all this before now. I kind of fell into it in an odd way, like most people who are involved in senior living. I went to work right out of my MHA program years ago, working for a hospital system that bought 7 nursing homes, and I was the youngest guy on the staff, and they just said, go run the nursing homes. And I was at first a little resistant to that idea, and then I found out that I liked it a whole lot better than acute care. Because it kind of fed the part of me that didn't go to seminary and the part of me that didn't go to medical school, because you wear a lot of hats as a long-term care, anything in leadership, not just in the nursing home, but for me, it was a series of nursing homes. And I never came back. I liked it that much better. And it is not for the faint of heart. I mean, if you like routine and predictability, this is probably not going to be your cup of tea. But if you like being able to think on your feet with imperfect and incomplete information and make decisions that need help others, you'll probably get a kick out of this. Because I don't know why I ever even kept a day timer or a calendar. None of the days wound up rolling out the way that I had them planned for what was going to happen at 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock. Almost never happened that way. But something about that kind of charged my battery. So if that sounded like something that you would be intrigued about, then I, without trying to get too daddish on you today, I'm going to try to encourage that thought process. Because honestly, Pete, because of my birth cohort, the boomers, this is going to be where the jobs are for the next 25 years. There's already 4,000 fewer hospitals in America than there were when I was in your chair, because they keep buying each other or consolidating. You know, there's all kinds of polite terms for merger and acquisition, but there's that many fewer organizations doing acute care. And frankly, the face of healthcare is going to change pretty dramatically because of that democratic shift. I'm sure you've already read in your other material, with a lot more focus on managing multiple chronic conditions than patching up people who broke something or needed surgery and getting them back in the game. It's going to change the face of medicine. And so a lot of what now is considered post-acute, which I kind of resent. That's been the term ever since we've had the Affordable Care Act. I don't like being defined as something we're not, but we haven't come up with a better term. So for at least the time being, we're post-acute. But, you know, we're also pre-acute and para-acute, and there's all kinds of other ways to describe what it is we do for a living. And it's a whole breadth of supports and services. I like that phraseology a little better than long-term care, but it's been slow to be embraced by the American public. Now, so two thoughts that if you hadn't heard this already in your studies on aging, two demographic factoids that kind of get our attention getters at a cocktail party. One, of course, is that 10,000 people, 10,000 Americans will turn 65 today. Today and tomorrow and the next day for the next 9 years. So that boomer group I was talking about earlier, born between 1946 and 1964, the biggest birth cohort ever. And we're not going away. And we're pretty resistant to just about anything that's been established before we hit the scene. So, I mean, if you go back to elementary schools when I was a little boy, being built because there were so many of us, to birthing centers, you know, when I was old enough to start a family, changing the whole face of every social institution as we've gone through the pipeline. And we're probably going to do that with what we now call long-term care too, having watched our parents and grandparents do stuff we don't want to do. So if we were going to try to do long-term care the way we've been doing it the last 60 years for this new cohort that's coming at us so fast, the same way, we would have to open somewhere in the United States every week between now and 2030 a new 100-bed skilled nursing facility. Think of that. Well, that's not happening. And it's probably a good thing it's not happening, because it's going to force us to be a little more inventive on how it is we're going to support people, how they want to live, where they want to live, and live a life worth living. You know, that's not my phrase. We'll probably encounter a writer named Dr. Bill Thomas along the way. He's a real thought leader in our field, and he used that phrase 15, 20 years ago, and I've been using it ever since, because it needs to be a life worth living. Just taking in air and eating food and drinking water is not living. And most people would agree with that, I think, especially when you get to the point where that's about all you can still do, and you get frustrated about it. So, Min, do you have my slides, or I need to share a screen from here? What's the best way to go about using those?
Mic's off, man.
Oh, headset isn't working. We'll try again. That's from Maureen. Okay. Of course, our IT person. Let me see if I can share. Oh, you got it. Okay. Oh, you changed up all my snappy graphics. Oh, that's all right. It's got the same information. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Oh, we lost it. I see Matthew, I don't see this. Do you guys see the shared screen? If not, I'll put mine up.
No, it's gone.
All right, let's try this. Can you see it now?
We do.
All right,
Yes.
super.
Yeah.
All
we're
right,
good.
so I know you've been using the textbook I worked with Doug Olson on trying to put out, and that was kind of an innocent thing to have happen too. Both of us are longtime administrators, and he wound up in academics way before I did. What happened to me is I retired in 2016 and I wasn't very good at it. So I've gone back to my alma mater and have been working in the MHA program there, trying to win people over from the dark side of acute care to senior living with some modest success. I've had a couple of students that have finished the program and then circle back to me and say, hey, you know, that long-term care stuff you were talking about, I think maybe I'd be interested in doing more about that. So it's still a small club that I've had an influence on, but I keep after it. Anyway, Doug and I were at a conference for the American Healthcare Association, one of the trade associations representing nursing homes, and moaning and groaning about the fact that in order for our respective programs to really cover the bases of what people needed to know to be well equipped and prepared to become a nursing home administrator, yet it is one book for finance and a different book for human resources and yet another for customers, patient services, and somebody ought to write a book. And a third person who was with us, who I think was just being a smart aleck at the time, but it got legs, said, well, why don't you two write it? And we kind of looked at each other and said, well, I've never written a book, but you know, that wouldn't be a bad idea. So we started down that path in 2019. And of course, came to market just as the pandemic was hitting. And so we had to quick like a bunny pivot because nobody was looking new at that point in time for a textbook, because we were really shifting gears in all of higher education on how we were going to even deliver content. But with that said, we're already now working on a second version because that's behind us now, the pandemic, and there was a lot of things to be learned, if we're smart, from things that occurred during that period, because nursing homes were pretty much a tinderbox. You know, you put a bunch of frail old people in a small space, sharing air that wasn't designed to be separated. And you get everything from social isolation to infection control and prevention issues that were just not on the radar screen 5-7 years ago. So where I am speaking with you today from is kind of an interesting gig. The Cabinet for Health and Family Services here in Kentucky buys half my time from the university to advise the secretary on all programs for adults. So that encompasses a pretty broad range, mainly seniors, but also folks with intellectual disabilities, which I kind of have the working knowledge of, like I do for home wiring. I know enough to be dangerous. And so I'm here today with that goal because I had kind of an unusual combination. My undergraduate degree was in microbiology, and I learned before I went to my MHA program that I like people better than bugs. So I wound up with a not useless undergraduate degree. At least it was dormant for a long time, unless I wanted to argue with a sanitarian about a gram-negative stain on something that he scraped the surface of. But once the pandemic came around, you know, microbes are pretty much built the same way they were 40 years ago. And I had the very rewarding experience to be an influencer anyway on how the state of Kentucky, handled the long-term care setting in a very uncertain time. And actually, we did pretty well here. You know, we're a small state, both in square miles and population. And so we were a great lab for trying stuff out. and things that I had kind of brought in a very Pollyanna fashion to the cabinet about cooperating with the provider community instead of just drumming them when they did something stupid actually worked. So we've known for a long time that positive reinforcement works way better than negative reinforcement. And in most states, you'll find the inspector general, the people who oversee the operation of licensed nursing facilities, have pretty much an enforcement attitude. They probably failed the state trooper aptitude test and became an inspector general. And just kind of have a tude about them. And we have less of that here. And I think I've been able to play a role in developing that for a bad set of reasons, but it worked out just fine. So this slide, I'm a big proponent that PowerPoint slides aren't something to be read to you. They're just cues for me to tell you what I wanted to remind myself to say. I have the understanding that you have already marched through what are the core domains of practice that have been established by the National Association of Long-Term Care Boards. So we're not going to spend much time on that today, other than to say how you might prepare to become a nursing home administrator. We'll wrap up with that thought. Instead, am I right? This is the content you guys have already covered in the book from the textbook I was talking about. Okay, that was my understanding.
Yeah.
One of the challenges going forward for us on a second edition of this same textbook is, what's different. And aside from the infection control and prevention issues, a lot of the home and community-based services world is caught up and in some instances bypassed established long-term care residential care. And leadership is leadership. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Whether you're running the Walmart, a hospital, nursing home, or a home health agency. Now you're in Southern California, so I guess I could either use water polo sports metaphors, or I'll stick with basketball and football. That's what we know here in the Midwest. All right. How do I? Okay. So these are not exactly antonyms to one another, but there is kind of a newer, more contemporary way of viewing the fundamental elements of being an effective leader in today's world going forward. And it's kind of an interesting mix of challenges, because you will be entering the field presumably in a leadership role before much longer, at a time when we've got the most diverse age-wise spread, multi chronological age mix of people, where you could literally be supervising somebody, could be your dad or mom, or in some instances, grandpa or grandma. It used to be pretty hierarchical based on age, and all the Yodas went to one end of the room and they were the leaders. Well, now folks are coming out with the kind of preparation you're getting, and they're advancing pretty swiftly in many instances to responsible positions, and you'll be working with, in a leadership role, people who have more life experience than you, and the smart players are going to be the ones that leverage that in a way that makes the organization successful, and not get caught up in the fact that, well, you could be my dad. So the difference between leadership and management is pretty simple in my view. You lead people, you manage things. You understand the distinction? So it sounds like it's kind of splitting hairs with semantics, but it's really not. If what you're interested in is advancing the mission of an organization, you pretty much got to get everybody rowing in the same direction and feel like they've got some skin in the game. Otherwise, it's just a job. And one of the things that I have really enjoyed in my career in senior living is that most of the people who survive any length of time working with seniors, they want to be there. They're the Marine Corps. They're not just drafted and serving in the foxhole next to you. They got something going on in their life, either a grandparent or a neighbor, somebody they've known that they see in the residents, and they want to make their lives better. Well, that's a great group of people to be thrown amongst, because you can get a lot done if people start out with a path that I'm here to make a difference in somebody else's life is a lot different than I'm here because I got to pay the rent. And so you're starting in a great place there. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's what drives people to work in a hospital, but I can tell you that I've seen a lot more of that attitude in the senior living space than just about any place in healthcare other than labor and delivery. You go to labor and delivery, the other end of the age spectrum, you see a lot of the same kind of stuff I'm talking about. People who are just dedicated to making maternal and child health their mission, and they stick with it. All right. So these other 4 terms I want to just touch on because our time is limited is the difference between being strategic and being tactical. A lot of folks get kind of caught up when they're doing strategic planning, and what they're really talking about is more about tactics. Strategy is about, in the big picture, deciding what's going to be different about your organization that distinguishes it from its competitors. What is our strategy here? And what are we going to do to beat the pants off the other guys, or just be the best, or the first, or both? Okay. Tactics are those things that you've got to organize to fulfill the strategic direction. All right. It takes steps. Actual things have to happen. And it doesn't make them in themselves strategic, but together they feed the strategy. You with me on this? Okay. So, we got any hockey fans in the group? No? You probably heard of the great Wayne Gretzky. He was a great hockey player. Well, he was famous for saying, go where the puck is not. So it's strategic to do stuff that either nobody else is doing or they haven't recognized yet is coming down the way, and be out there and be bold enough to do something about it and play to win. You know, I use a lot of sports metaphors. Sometimes they're a little outdated, like Wayne Gretzky. But teams that win to keep from losing, they lose. Teams that win to play to win typically do much better. Okay. Same thought. Be strategic, be bold, reward innovation and trying stuff that makes sense to try, and then congratulate people even when it fails, probably even more so when it fails, so that everybody else knows that what is valued in our organization is trying stuff that makes sense to try. You hear me on this? Okay. And then that kind of feeds into the innovation idea. A lot of organizations are successful, and then they try to build a moat around it, like around the castle, and keep what they've built. And it doesn't work that way. You got to keep after with what's the next big thing. Now, most of you are young enough to not remember a BlackBerry, but they're the great example of what I'm talking about. I loved my BlackBerry. I loved that it had buttons you could touch and push. I loved everything about it, but they did not keep up with the technology that was passing them by when the iPhone came about. And you don't see a lot of people with BlackBerries anymore, and there's a good reason for that. And, you know, a Blockbuster video rental place, the same kind of thing. All right. So innovation requires that you're always looking for the next big thing. And protectionism is the enemy of innovation, because if you try to just hold what you've got and let nobody else touch it, you're going to be left there standing there holding it when it's no longer useful. And then the last thing I want to just touch on these 4 concepts is the difference between critical thinking and being too dogmatic and biased. You know, we all have biases. We like to think we don't, but you have stuff that's built into you that's because of your life experience and maybe your family, culture, a whole variety of things that build bias in our society. Everything from politics and all of the crap that's going on in the news right now to thinking that, oh, well, you know, that kid's Asian, I'll bet he's good in math, that kind of stuff. You don't even realize until you say it out loud and go, did I just say that? Oh my gosh. So be aware of the fact that we bring those kinds of filters with us to the table, and it doesn't make you a bad person. You just got to have an awareness around it and be open to. My grandfather had a saying that I love to quote is, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should use them proportionally. Do a lot of listening, a lot less talking. And critical thinking is just, that's a great adjective, critical. Doesn't mean you're saying it's bad. It means you're critiquing it. Okay. And trying to build up from the ground level. Why did somebody think this was a good idea before you take it apart? President John Kennedy was quoted saying, don't take down a fence until you learn why the person who put it there. Same idea. Okay. So let's get to some nuts and bolts. There is a continuum of care. And continuum is the only word besides vacuum that I can think of that's got 2 U's in front of one or the other. But it's used a lot when you hear senior living talked about, because it's a breadth. It's a salad bar. And unlike a lot of things in healthcare that are in fact linear in nature, these kinds of lists tend to be linear because either from lowest acuity to highest acuity, but people don't cooperate and just move through the system in the order we've created for licensure level. People hop around because their needs change, and they also are bidirectional. You know, young people especially tend to think that old people just get worse over time, but it's not uncommon, honestly, for an old person who breaks a hip to come out to the nursing home after having that hip repaired in the hospital, getting enough better to move to an assisted living or independent living congregate housing because they've been living alone, and it's probably not as good an option for them to go back to their home, or maybe they do go back to their home. But that door swings both ways more than most people imagine. It is bidirectional. It's not just one way to the grave. So I've got them organized on this slide in order of highest acuity coming out of the hospital for skilled nursing facility. In California, you still sometimes see also the acronym NF for nursing facility. So it's tiered, you know, that there's a high end and a not as high end. For transitional care is another term that gets used. Most states use the term assisted living. We have a couple of tiers of that here in Kentucky, but we're kind of the last of the Mohicans on that. So assisted living is less need for intervention of complex medical conditions and more supports for how can I make it through my day with a minimum amount of assistance and be glad that I have some independence left in making decisions about my own life. So a residential care facility, a personal care home, are 2 other terms that are used in different states that license this level of care. Almost everybody has some kind of a regulatory environment for congregate living of some nature. And once you don't have that, then you're pretty much in independent living. I mean, it's renting an apartment. They might have meals. They might have a relationship with a home health agency or hospice to provide certain kinds of supports. But basically, you pay rent and you live there. Now, there are a couple places that have popped up, and I meant to try to find out if there was one near you before today, and I just didn't get it done. It's an increasingly popular model as we talk about continuing care retirement community for an ownership interest in the place where you're living instead of pure rental or some kind of arrangement like it's been popular for the last 40, 50 years. So a CCRC, you're seeing the term life plan community kind of replacing that slowly but surely. That's something they've tried to do over the last 7 or 8 years. They mean the same thing. It's having multiple levels of care and supports on the same campus, same geographic space. So you might see some combination of independent living, assisted living, skilled nursing, rehab, or any 2 of those constitute a CCRC, so that you theoretically, anyway, especially if you're a married couple, have the opportunity to move once, and then you can get the services you need as you change. One of the problems that has been encountered with the CCRC model is that we So I'll use that couple as an example. We don't age identically on the same schedule. And so on the one hand, it's a benefit that my wife can be in assisted living and I'm in independent living, and we're technically living at the same place, but we're not really living in the same unit. Okay. Other places try harder to provide supports and services for you to what's called age in place. Have you heard that term? Age in place. And that's got a lot of merit too. It's kind of the parallel to what educators have done for years about whether to mainstream kids with intellectual disabilities or segregate them and do special kinds of services or some combination of the two. Is it better to be integrated with the whole herd or treated separately? And there's legitimate arguments in both directions, and I've seen it work both ways. But the new common thing, I think, that doesn't get talked much about yet because it's not prevalent, but I think it's got a lot of promise for the boomer generation because we have watched our parents and grandparents spend their life savings going to a long-term care facility and then spending down to become eligible because they're so poor for Medicaid, and probably not interested in doing the same thing for us. And so this idea of a co-op where a CCRC is formed as think of it as a homeowners association on steroids, where they have a real estate interest based on the size of the unit in proportion to the overall complex. Okay, so let's say my apartment, for ease of math, is 1/100th because there's 100 people who live there. Then I have what amounts to a stock certificate worth 1/100th of the corporation. And if the company does well, I get a dividend. If it doesn't, I share in the pain. But most importantly, what I have is a deed to the property. And when I die, my estate is going to be able to sell that and get the money. That doesn't happen in most CCRCs. And that's a whole nother lecture. But trust me, the way most CCRCs operate is the residents are the bank. They give a big entrance fee, then that gets amortized over time. And if you live long enough, typically eight years, because usually 100 months, you win. You win the lottery. Yeah, because then you can continue to live at a rate that's adjusted for having that large entrance fee. But if you live less than that, you get just the unamortized portion back, and maybe not even that, depending on how they've structured it. So this came about in the 70s when interest rates hit double digits, and in places that wanted to develop these couldn't do it with traditional bank loans because you couldn't make it pencil out. So they made the first occupant the bank. Well, then it kind of played forward with each subsequent resident, all right, and inflated for normal inflation. So it makes sense. It's just that I think for the next cohort of consumers, it's going to be a tougher sell. And so what you see a lot of CCRCs doing now is setting aside some portion of their stock. Let's say I have 100 apartments. Well, I'm going to reserve 10 of them this year to move over to straight rental and not do that entrance fee jazz anymore. Because if somebody's got the kind of resources it takes to plunk down $500,000 to move into one of these places, they know a little bit about managing money. So let them manage their own money instead of giving it to us. So I'm getting a little philosophical on here. Where I think the big growth is going to be isn't on any of the things that I just had on that slide. It's going to be in the arena of home and community-based services, because that's where people want to be. And the smart money, in my view, is going to be on organizations that figure out a way to help them do that and be safe and be secure and be happy with their familiar surroundings. So probably the newest tool in the tool chest that I think families don't have an awareness about, but there's a great one, are adult day centers. And it's just like it sounds. It's a child daycare center for old people. So you go there for the day and you have active program. You might have a nursing and healthcare support capability. You might have PT, OT, speech. You might have but you get a nutritious meal. But instead of spending the night there, you go home. And what adult children who try to have mom or dad move in with them have discovered is that means I can still go to work. And it means I can, not be a full-time caregiver with this adult day center option. And for a spouse caregiver, it can mean I get a day off. It doesn't mean that the person even has to do the program every day. It could be once or twice a week. Anyway, I think that's a common thing. Some states license just a healthcare day center. Some states do it, whether it's social model or medical model. But I think you're going to see a lot more of this than new nursing homes. Similarly with home health, we've been kind of lax with respect to what's expected of paid leadership of a home health agency. And I think that's going to change because now you got millions and millions of dollars of Medicare and Medicaid money flowing through these things. And except for 3 states, there are virtually no standards for what it takes to run one of these, like there are for nursing homes. And I think the smart money is on that. Just like we license nursing home administrators now, there will be increased interest in expanding the scope of those licensure boards to have some kind of minimum standard that says to the public, this person has a modicum of understanding on the same domains really that we had on that earlier slide. You got to know a little something about customer care. You got to know a little something about finance. You got to know a little something about HR, and you need something about environment and compliance with regulatory requirements. Well, we have none of that in the home health agency circuit right now. It's pretty much, if you got enough money to start one, you can start it out of your garage. And that surprises a lot of people because there are not standards for the person in charge. Now, there are standards for the agency. Don't get me wrong. But they came about for a lot of the same bad reasons that we have in nursing homes, because people did a crappy job. And so then there became standards. We learned a little bit from the nursing home experience, but not enough, in my view, about the home health, home and community-based services arena where we got out in front of it. We're still kind of, once a bad thing happens, we react to it. So home health and hospice are kind of not blending, but they're getting closer and closer to one another, where you see a lot of providers that have been in the hospice space getting into home health, and conversely, people that have been in the home health space getting interested in palliative care and hospice care, end-of-life care. And nobody can really tell me yet where that's going to end, but some of the same things I just finished saying about home health are true for hospice, that the person in charge, the administrative chief executive officer, has no minimum requirements currently under federal law. And I think that will change. Probably not in the current administration, which is a little more anti-government anything. But I think that pendulum will probably swing in that direction over time. Maybe because of some disaster first. I hate to think that that's going to be the cause, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's what gets us over the top. But other kinds of things that are in the HCBS world that are not necessarily purely healthcare, but all need leaders to run the shop, the organization, are like Meals on Wheels, home deliver meals. That's a very complex enterprise. And it happens, but it by and large happens because the people who are running the show care deeply about the people getting those meals. And it doesn't mean they always have the most efficient operation. They can probably be a little bit better, but a ton of money is going through that. And you can bet when there's money involved, there's going to be some expectation of public accountability, right? Communications, Maureen, I know you mentioned your interest in tech, but that kind of bleeds over into communications in many respects, because there's a whole ton of new applications that are coming about with respect to wearables and monitoring devices, and what are they hooked up to, and how do we encrypt that data in a way that keeps it safe as protected health information. A lot of challenges, it fascinates me that we healthcare have not had the political will to get past the HIPAA restrictions. If my bank can call me and ask if I was in the Phoenix airport on Tuesday because my credit card showed a charge for a shirt that I purchased there, and that's outside my normal pattern of purchasing behavior, then why the heck can't my doctor and pharmacy and lab and hospital all know the same things about me? They all have different systems that are not interoperable. And so there's a lot of opportunity within that whole sphere. It's not just about the EMR anymore. Other kinds of technologies that you don't think of maybe as much as technology have to do with everything from prostheses and other kinds of equipment that help us with things that we are less functional with anymore, but they are in a very real way technology. It doesn't have to have batteries to be technology. Transportation is a huge thing for seniors as a barrier to accessing everything from healthcare to the grocery. And I had an opportunity this week in Austin, Texas, to ride my first Waymo, and I didn't have the nerve to pull the trigger. I thought maybe I'd get in one if it was in town, but I didn't have the nerve. But I did hear a comedian had a pretty good line about it. He said, can anybody tell me why there's side view mirrors on a Waymo? Nobody had a good answer because I don't think there is one. But transportation, figuring out, and this is particularly true in rural areas, but it's true everywhere. And then the distinction between formal paid care, some of these enterprises that I've talked about have paid effort, but a huge amount of caregiving goes on in our country informally with extended family members and neighbors and others who have skin in the game that if you tried to monetize would just be off the charts expensive. So we're going to have to be tuned in, I think, going forward with either tax policy, and I think it's New Hampshire or Vermont, and I always get them mixed up, but one of those two states is experiment a little bit with tax credits for people who leave, even temporarily, the workforce to care for an aging parent or aging spouse. And they get some help that way with how to make that work. As opposed to a Medicaid waiver that pays for those services is, take the same money and take it out on the revenue side with a tax credit. And I think you'll see more of that kind of thinking. Mississippi is experimenting with, you guys probably remember having to fill out what's called a FAFSA form when you look for any kind of financial assistance with your college education. Well, think about converting that for someone who's getting ready to apply for Medicaid at 66, 67, and they got to figure out, well, she's got nothing, but she's got a doctor's son and she's got a attorney daughter, and they got something. So what if your expected family contribution, that EFC, remember that calculation at the bottom of the page on the FAFSA form? That's what you're expected to put into the till. Well, what if you did that with qualifying for Medicaid, because it's supposed to be for people who are medically indigent? They don't have enough money to pay the tab. So I'll be real interested to see how they fare with this kind of thinking, because some of those family members may not live in Mississippi. And, what they can do for a Mississippi resident is fiddle around with their tax return. That's harder to do if that doctor's son lives in Denver. So, I don't know what their prospects for succeeding are, but I think you're going to see more of that kind of thinking, that the family needs to be invited back into the discussion of who's responsible for mom's care. And I think that's going to come about probably from necessity. I'm going to rock it through these next couple because I don't remember, are we on till the top of the hour or next half hour? What's our time frame?
I think we're on till 11.
Yeah,
11, okay.
it's okay.
All right.
We plan for an
Okay.
hour. Yeah.
So I can name that tune in 3 notes. Matthew will understand that metaphor, but others might be too young to remember that show. At any rate, you'll have these slides, and this one is pretty self-explanatory about the kinds of things that are, I think, on the uptick. The ones that are on the clinical side should be no surprise to you. And by uptick, I mean, within those disciplines, beyond licensure for the profession, there will be a need for leaders. Okay. And what we've done classically poorly in healthcare is you take a perfectly good nurse and you promote her or him to a supervisory role and don't give them any additional tools for how to lead people, and then wonder why that doesn't go well. And so I think organizations that recognize that are going to get better at making sure that folks are well prepared. But in the non-clinical area, and since none of you expressed that you're coming out of that side of the house, this is one for you to pay attention to. I think the hot potatoes, the ones that are really going to get a lot of attention because there's so few people really prepared to do it. Everybody that's doing it now pretty much came through the side door or got school of hard knocks. The whole area of risk management broadened with the pandemic to include clinical issues. Risk management used to mean weather events. So we would drill for bad weather, or in your neck of the woods, earthquake, or maybe an active shooter. But now we have to also include planning for a pandemic. Even if it's going to be another 100 years, it's part of the thinking on emergency preparedness. Technology and cybersecurity. The whole ransomware thing is hitting hard. First with small community hospitals that don't have a good firewall, but you can bet that long-term care is going to be right on the heels of that because they're mostly working in a PC environment and really prone to that kind of attack. And then really just maintaining the physical plant and grounds of these buildings. Most of our long-term care stock was built in the 70s and 80s. All right. So it's coming of age, and you can either decide, okay, it's worth reinvesting in this and we're going to upgrade, including those HVA systems that were so badly exposed during the pandemic, or just take it down and start over. But, unless there's some kind of a federal effort along the lines of the Hill-Burton Act back in the 50s and 60s that helped build all those community hospitals, the capital's got to come from somewhere. And, how are we going to do that? Which kind of goes back to my argument earlier that a lot of the growth is going to be in home and community-based services. Because if the place decides to just close, there aren't going to be fewer old people for quite a while. It's going to continue to get bigger. So we'll have that need. I talk all the time to kids in our business school about healthcare finance being a big need. We're a pretty unique niche. I mean, debits and credits are debits and credits, but the way Medicare works, the way Medicaid works, the way most commercial insurers work is vastly different than anybody who learns banking and accounting for that, the rest of the business world. So it's a pretty unique setting in which there's going to be a great need for leadership around especially cash flow management, because I'll use as an example, the state of Illinois right now is about 7 months behind on paying its Medicaid vendors. So if you're running a predominantly Medicaid nursing home, you got payroll to meet Friday. And yes, on the books, the state owes you $17 million, but you're not going to see it till Christmas. So you got to have a good relationship with your bank, and then how to budget and monitor performance over time. And then lastly, we're a people business. It's all about HR, attracting the right number of qualified people who are competent, friendly, and get this, come to work. Almost a third of last year's turnover among nursing homes nationally was for exceeding the limits the employer had on attendance or vacancy. So we're not losing people because they can't do the work. They got to come to work. And, that's a cultural shift that's bigger than long-term care, but one that you have to be mindful of. All right. So quickly, a couple of you apparently have expressed an interest in wanting to know more about, well, if I wanted to become a nursing home administrator, how would I even do that? And California is in kind of a unique club, along with New York and Florida, is the attitude among your licensing board members is nobody does it like we do it. So they have kind of their own little world with respect to the hurdles you have to overcome. But nationally speaking, The other 48 jurisdictions, because the other 47 states plus Washington, D.C., also have licensing boards. This is a state rights kind of thing. Okay, and it's the nuttiest thing ever. If we were starting over in 1970 when this was all created, we would not do what we're doing, but it is what it is. If you have a California license as a nursing home administrator, you can go just about anywhere in the union besides New York and Florida without even sneezing. So a California license is one to pursue. However, you can also run over to Utah or Nevada, get licensed, and then apply for reciprocity, or what's called starts with an E. Anyway, endorsement, and go to work in California. So their requirements are slightly less in terms of the experiential learning component, but same thing happens here. Kentucky has 7 contiguous states, the most in the nation. We have 7 states surrounding us. 4 of those are easier, 3 of them are not, than getting a license in Kentucky. And so the ones that are not, those people come here and get licensed, then go back home and work. So this website that I've stuck in here is the landing page for NAB, the National Association of Boards, Long-Term Care Administrator Boards. I'm not sure how they got that acronym. It doesn't describe the organization's name. If you were just to go for NAB on the stock exchange or in a Google search, you would come up with the National Association of Broadcasters. But that's why it's NABWeb/home. When you get there, there are a couple of choices, and you can pick a tab that takes you to the state where you either are now or where you'd like to live, and it will tell you all about what are the requirements to become licensed there. Some states require a bachelor's degree, almost all of them, but 2 or 3. A couple of states have even gone now to a master's degree, but they're in the Northeast. They're not out near you. But nabweb.org is kind of the place to start on figuring out, okay, what am I going to need to have in order to get that credential? Typically, you have to be old enough to vote. You have to have a bachelor's degree, like I mentioned before, and clear a criminal records background check. The relevant experience is what's vastly different across states. The new national standard set by NAB for moving about the states is 1,000 hours. That's roughly 6 months full time of getting some kind of an internship that logs those hours. Some have less than that. Some have more than that. But 1,000 hours is pretty safe for probably 2/3 of the states. There are 3 exams offered by NAB. Well, 4, I guess. There's a core exam about those core domains that we talked about earlier, that 83%, they did a study, 83% of those skills and knowledge criteria are true for nursing home, for residential care and assisted living, or for home and community-based services. So the core exam applies to all 3 service lines, and then you can take a supplemental exam to get 1, 2, or all 3 of the other credentials from NAB. Now, not very many states yet are licensing those other 2 areas, but more and more are considering it. And so my recommendation, and this is the daddish part, is to go for gusto and get all 3, because then you get this credential from NAB called HSE, the Health Services Executive. And for 27 states now, you show up with HSE after your name, you're good to go. You got no other work to do, pay the fee, and you're licensed. Okay. That was by design. They set out to do that 17 years ago, and now it's working. The American College of Healthcare Administrators is what ANA is to nurses, but for long-term care administrators. There's another outfit called ACHE that is predominantly hospital administrators. They've talked through the years now and again about merging, but they haven't. So there are 2 different associations now. So it's like the American League and National League. They do the same thing for slightly different constituents. The link that I put on this slide is the one that goes automatically to that list of state by state by state. Here's what they require, and this is what you got to do. Renewal in most states is biannual, every other year. Some states do it annually, but most of them move to biannual or biennial. And you have to do some of the same things. They want to reestablish that you're still not a criminal and that you haven't been disciplined by the board in the interim, and that you get your application in on time so it didn't lapse before you're asking to be renewed, because that's in most states there's a penalty to be paid for doing that. I'm down to 1 minute. Okay, I'm going to rocket ahead. So you'll hear this term administrative and training, although more and more states are now using the terminology internship than AIT. But that's historically what it's been called, and it's kind of patterned after the old time apprenticeship. If you were going to be an apprentice plumber or an apprentice electrician, so learning from somebody who's doing it now is the concept. And in most states, it's that 6 month that I was talking about of experience, where you kind of do a rotation through all the departments, get a little idea of what everything, all the contributing parts do, and then have some basic knowledge about it. You don't have to do all those jobs, but if you're going to supervise them, it's best to know a little something about it. So there's a template at the American College of Healthcare Administrators website that's pre-populated with that 1,000 hours about the different departments. But based on your life experience, you can change that. So if you grew up on the clinical side of the house, you're probably not going to spend as much time in nursing as you might want to spend in food service. And so you can tailor it as a guide for how to structure your internship experience. There's also at the NAB website a companion free 4 CEs, 4 hours of continuing education for a preceptor who would be your mentor, who, let me just tell you, because someone's been a licensed administrator for 20 years doesn't make them a good preceptor. And it's a really good idea that if you do wind up getting an arrangement with somebody who wants to be your preceptor but hadn't done it in a while, since it's free, it's already been paid for by a foundation grant, and they get CEs for it, which they're going to need for relicensure, to encourage them to do it, because it kind of walks them through what it means to be a good preceptor and what kinds of things they should be doing for you and what kinds of things they can be expecting from you. Anyway, it's a really good thing, and it'd probably be good for you to just scope out so you have expectations of a preceptor. All right, so here's the Yoda slide. If you want to make a difference in the lives of others and address a key societal need and be in a career that has all kinds of recognition for professional achievement and your growth, and the pivot challenge that I mentioned earlier, have a doable work-life balance, which I know is increasingly important for people in your age cohort. And I admire you for that, because mine was not that way. We just worked our ass off and then wonder, well, what happened? What do you mean my kid's graduating from high school? How'd that happen? It pays pretty well. I mean, you can make more money in a hospital, but you won't be nearly as happy working in a nursing home, I promise you. And career flexibility. I love the fact that when I go to some event where my adult children's friends from the school are gathered, like a wedding or some other activity in the community, and I'm remembered as the dad that was on the field trip. I love that, because I had the flexibility that I could do that. And there aren't too many jobs that offer you that. And it's going to grow. It's only going to get bigger for most of your working career. So what's not to like? So I did put a slide in for Q&A, but I took your whole time. So you can either email me with a question that you've got. I'm free to stay, but I know you might not be. So it's entirely up to you.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure all of you learn a lot. And for me, and not only a learning, but it's like inspiring me to take my own action to move to amazing career, I'm sure. And also that I want to thank you, Dr. Wade, and to support me all the way, all the time. And I would like you and to talk a little bit about what you thought.
Well, thanks, man, very much for inviting me and thinking of me. And not only me, but a student that I referred to you recently. We really appreciate that hustle. Keith, that was excellent and informative. I come at this sideways, actually. I'm an urbanist. I started teaching in this program. My PhD is in urban studies from an urban studies
Yeah.
planning program in Portland, Oregon, in the way back. I reckon I'm a rough contemporary with you, and I'm pretty sure I got all of your jokes and cultural references. I felt 25 years old again. I love the Gretzky quote. That one will never age. It's a marvelous, marvelous metaphor and quote for in so many applications. Okay. Um, and this from a guy I wasn't a hockey fan. So that one migrated. That's got wheels. This is just very informative, and I would
Okay.
love. Okay. Who am I? Briefly, I came at this from urban studies planning. I was teaching in this program, urban design and community well-being stuff that I love, and yeah, I can geek out on that all day. That has aging in place implications in big time urban design.
Big time. Yes, sir.
We go more into that another time. I'm trying to get my head around the students, their outlook, their interests, and rebuilding this program enrollment. It was pegged to international recruitment enrollment, and we're shifting back to domestic for a number of reasons.
Sure.
I've taught in public administration primarily, and I'm so gratified by the eagerness, professionalism, and the focus of the bachelor students and the MHA students. And I'm particularly interested after hearing from you, from the students, if they have a minute, for their interest in adult care and its many variations on that theme that you have elaborated really well here today. If you guys don't mind, Louis, Maureen, Abraham, sharing your interest and perspective on this and how you envision your career ambitions and motivations along the lines of what Keith has shared with us, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. Yes, please. Mm-hmm.
Sure, I'll go first. So, the reason why I took this course for long-term health administration as the elective was because of when I did my internship at the VA Loma Linda. So, as a veteran, I'm part of the Global War on Terrorism veterans. But what I noticed was I'd say 90% of the veterans that I would help or assist were, the Vietnam era veterans, the older veterans.
Sure.
So I noticed I didn't really deal a lot with veterans in my age group from the ages of 30 to even 45. Most of these veterans are on the older spectrum, and they do need a lot of assistance, even just booking an Uber, right? When they're done with their appointments, even assisting them, patient escorting them to their department where they're going to be, like, whether it be oncology, radiology, So that's why I kind of grabbed that interest in this class, is because of what I was exposed to from the VA in Loma Linda. So yeah, it's very interesting. I think one of the most interesting uh, points that Dr. Knapp got was I didn't realize, 10,000 will, because I wrote down notes. So it said 10,000 will turn 65 today, tomorrow, and for the next 10 years. So I kind of realized, especially at the VA, yes, there's more elder veterans in the population that need assisting. That's all I have.
Oh, Abe, let me just add, I'll pile on a little bit. January 1st, 2026 is a big date. Can you think about why? The first boomer will turn 80.
Oh, okay.
Holy smoke. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark it on your calendar. Celebrate.
So, yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
That's good.
Thank you, Eb. Maureen, you want to say something?
Yeah, I would say, like I said, my background is in IT, and I'm a lot older than you think. I got all of those references as well. I've been in IT for over 25 years. But I will say I've worked in many different industries. And again, this is an industry that interests me mostly because I've had to deal with, long-term care for parents and in-laws and things like that. And so it's been very interesting to me. I will say that after listening to this, I didn't realize there was such a need for leadership in this area. And so to me, that's very interesting because I've never thought of it from that perspective. Again, I just took this class because it seemed interesting. And so now it's something I think I'll look into a little bit more as potentially, something
Good.
I could actually do. So it's been very educational. I appreciate it.
Yes, welcome. Mhm.
Okay, so for me, like I said, my background was in marketing, but then I took up this specific master's because when I was taking my internship, my hospital administrator there that I got to shadow kind of did the same path, but instead of long-term care, he went to a maternity field. So he noticed that there was a lack for good maternity hospitals back in my country, and he built his own maternity hospital, and now it's doing great. So he explained to me that there's a big gap for elderly care and specifically nursing home facilities or like good retirement homes. So he suggested that maybe I should take a look into that. And then when I researched more about it, I saw that there is really a big gap. So that's my main goal is to be a nursing home administrator and improve the field.
Where's home, Louis?
Philippines.
Philippines?
Yeah, Philippines.
Well, an interesting sociological shift that's occurring throughout the Pacific Rim is that the great reverence of most of those cultures for elders is eroding with the westernization of, as the globe gets smaller because we know each other's cultures. And so the heavy reliance on family to take care of someone who grows very old, that expectation is beginning to drop off the edge.
Yes,
And
definitely.
and yeah, and as that occurs, the phenomenon you're talking about will happen not just here in the United States, but probably around the world.
Yeah, probably around the world too. But there's a bigger emphasis on countries like mine since it focuses on like giving back to your parents,
Sure.
but a lot of the younger generations are not leaning towards that. Yeah, so that's one of the biggest problems that I see.
So so I know you're not a hockey fan if you come from that part of the world, but
No, I'm not.
pay, atten-
I'm
pay,
sorry.
pay attention, Dr. Witt and me both. Go where the puck is not.
Yeah,
I agree with
definitely.
you guys. Originally, I came from China almost 30
Hmm.
years ago. I went to school in Maryland, and then just for a short training program. And then I went back to China, work a couple of years, came back and get into the gerontology career. And what I can tell you is this is not a field that you just need a paycheck. Is you have to use your
Oh
heart,
yeah.
and it's all about your heart. Without that, and you just go somewhere else and get a bigger paycheck. So yeah, it really is a great and one time in our life opportunity to talk to the top leader in this, not only in this country, in this world. Yeah, I appreciate.
I
Yeah.
had the good fortune to host a team from the health, what do they call it? People's Republic of China Health Ministry. Sent a team to the United States, and our facility was one of the ones that they visited. And honest to Pete, man, the pure scale of their challenge because of the limited number of births that they allowed for so
One
many
child
years,
policy.
you
Yeah, the
know,
one child
the,
policy. Yeah.
oh my worst. Well, there are more people over the age of 62 living in the People's Republic of China
Mhm.
than there are Americans. Period. Think of that.
True.
Oh my word.
Big trouble.
Yeah. They got plenty to say grace over, as my grandfather would say.
Yeah. I don't want to talk anything about political, but we all human beings. We help human beings. Yeah.
Fancy that. Yeah. Well, I wish you all the best as you move forward with good fortune. You've picked well on the kinds of things that, I mean, you can still narrow it down a little bit further. And I didn't mention this, but one of the neat things about the whole scope of senior living is the way NAB has structured its exam program. You have the ability to move about the cabin pretty freely, like they say on Southwest Airlines. You don't have to be just a nursing home administrator. You can do almost anything on that slide over the course of a career. And sometimes you land with an organization that's doing it all right now under one corporate umbrella. Who was it on the group? Somebody's going to work for Kaiser. Was that Abe? They're classic. I mean, they have got it figured out about where they're going and have a great idea. I suspect they'll be very successful at it. They've been successful at just about everything they touch, but they've figured out this aging thing is for real, and let's figure out how we can get a piece of it. That I'll leave you with my Diet Dr. Pepper.
Is that healthy?
Of course not.
Yeah, I can see we will have a lot of great administrators and in the healthcare administration.
Sure looks like it.
From Laverne. Yeah, I bet it. Yeah, I really, truly appreciate Dr. Witt and your support.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting us. Keith, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah,
sure.
Appreciate,
if the students have to leave, if Min and Matthew could stay for just a second, I think I might have a gem for you on recruiting.
You bet.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.